Hi and welcome back to the training. So today we're looking at a thing called aggregation. And with this we're getting into some core analytical SQL. So what is aggregation? Well, there are two elements to it. Is grouping and summarizing. And grouping is finding repeated fields and then squishing all the data up into those headings. And summarizing is finding totals, averages, minimum values, maximum values, and counts. Okay, it's doing summary functions and calculations. So the best way to describe this, as ever, is with a demo, and we're going to connect to the training database. So use SQL training. There's a table in there called global population. So what this is, it's a list of all the countries in the world, the continent that that country is in, the population, and then the population mil column is that same number but divided by 1,000,000, so it's just easier to work with. So this one, for example, Afghanistan is in the continent of Asia. The population is 38.9283 million. Okay. So if we want to look at the total value of that population mil column, we could say select, let's just borrow that, select, well, if we do population mil on its own, it'll just list that column. Every value in that column is 235 values in that column. But if we want to look at the total of that column, we use the keyword sum, and that will give us the total of that column. So 7,826 million. So that's population of the Earth, that's 7.8 billion. Okay, so these figures are accurate as of summer 2022, summer 2021, so it's not completely accurate and up to date, but it's close enough for what we need it for today. So that is our sum of population. Okay, so as well as sum, well, there are 5 main aggregation functions. So there's a min, as min pop, and that shows us the smallest value in that data set. So if we do this and say order by population mil, that top value, the smallest value, is 0.0008, which is Vatican City with a population of 801. Okay. Similarly, we can do max, so that will give us the largest value in there. So 1439. Any guesses what's the biggest country in terms of population? Well, it's China. So 1.4 billion in China, so that's what that is there, 1.1439. And then there's a average. So the average population of all the countries in the world is 33 million. So what that does, it's the mean average. So if you think back to your maths lessons at school, mean is the total of the column, 7,826 million, divided by the number of values in that column. So to get the number of values, we can use the keyword count. So that now there are 235 rows in that table. The total of that is 7,826. So if you divided 7,826 by 235, you'd get 33.3. Should we try it? Select 7,826.3093 divided by 235. We're looking for 33.303. 33.303. So that's your mean average. So those 5 there are your 5 key aggregation functions. Now there are others. There are some really mathematical ones like standard deviation is the one that springs to mind, and lots of others that I've never used in 20 years of working with SQL. So those 5 there are the only ones I think I've ever used. Sum, min, max, average and count. So I've just thrown a couple of comments in there. So that's population by country and continent, and then totals for the entire data set. But what if we want to group that? What if we want to say, well, let's not look at the entire data set. Let's group it by continent. So to do that, we'll copy this and just paste it below. Totals. So what we do is we put the field continent in there. Now if we try and run that, will give us an error. And the error is this: that field continent is invalid in the select list because it is not contained in either an aggregate function or the group by clause. So there's a rule, okay? Every field listed in this select list has to be either a aggregate function, which is these, sum, min, max, average or count, or in the group by clause. So what we're doing here is we are grouping by continent. So we need to tell it that. Group by continent. So now when we run it, we get those same figures but split by continent. Okay. So this is where group by really comes into its own. So we get the total for Africa, the smallest amount in Africa, the minimum. Oh, I've not given those the right alias, have I? Let's do that again. So the minimum amount in Africa, the maximum in Africa, the average, and then the total number of African rows. So let's just now look at that population by country. So we'll pick the smallest one here in terms of the number of rows. So South America has only got 15 rows, so we're going to say where continent equals South America. And what we see there are 15 rows of data for all our South American countries. So when we look at this, we say South America, just move that up a little bit. So we say the total is 430 million. The smallest is 0.0035, which is that one, Falkland Islands. The biggest is 212 million, which is Brazil. The average is 28 million, and there are 15 rows of data. 15 is the count of those fields. So the area where people often get confused with having and group by is applying filters. Okay, so if we wanted to add a filter, we could add a filter here that says where continent equals South America. We do that and we just get the totals for South America. Yeah, the total, the min, the max, the average, the count, just for South America, because we've applied that filter there. But what if we wanted to apply a filter across the whole data set, but say where the average is greater than 20 million? You can't do that in a where clause. What we need to do with that is we need to have a thing called having. And we say having the average is greater than 20. So where you've got the result of a calculated aggregated column, you have to put that in a having. So there's a reason for that, and what that is all down to is a thing called SQL order of operations, and it's to do with the way that SQL analyzes a query and produces the result. So the first thing that happens when you run a query is that SQL looks at the from and the joins to look at what tables you're getting the data from. And it's making life easy for itself. It's saying, let's start from the data that we're actually looking at. We'll ignore everything else. Okay. The next thing it looks at is where. So it's got the tables, which in this case is global population. If we'd had that where clause in there, it would have said, right, we're only looking at the South America data. So already SQL has said, that's our data set. That's all we're looking at. Okay. The next thing it looks at is a group by, if there is one. Obviously, if there isn't one, it doesn't matter. So the group by is continent. So it's saying, okay, so we're aggregating this data by continent. Obviously, in this case, we've only got one continent. But if we'd remove that that filter, it would then do calculations by continent. Okay. So the next thing it looks at is having. So that's another filter. So it's saying, okay, so we're only looking at those where the result of that having clause is population mil is greater than 20. And then it says window functions. So what it means by that is window functions are a particular type of function that we'll be looking at in detail in a future lesson. So I don't really want to talk about it now, but they're kind of a type of function that are a bit more complex than regular functions. And you'll see why when we come to study them. Window function. And then it looks at the select list. So then it says, what fields do we want to return? Are there any calculations in there? Anything like that. The next thing it looks at is distinct. So what is distinct? Well, let me show you. So distinct is a way of getting unique values. So if we said select continent from global population, what that will do is it list us all our continents, all 235 values. But obviously, there are only 6 populated continents in the world. So we've got Asia, Europe, Africa, Oceania, Europe again, Africa again, North America again. So there's a lot of repeated values. So to get rid of those, we put distinct after the select. And when we run that, it only shows unique values. Okay, so that's something that could be really useful. So it looks at distinct next to see if there are any repeated values that need to be deduplicated. And then it looks at union. So union is a way of combining data sets. Again, we'll be looking at a lesson of its own in a later stage. And then it's got order by. Oh, doesn't go there, that goes there. And the final one that it looks at is top n limit. So top n is, let me show you. So if we said country, we could just, we don't want to see every country, we just want to see the top 10. So you just write top 10, after you select, it just shows the 10 countries. Now they're linked, they're ordered alphabetically by default. So we're going to say order by population mil, desk, and then you see the top 10 countries by population. And you can put that in there as well and see the actual figures. That's what top 10 is. Limit is the same thing, but when you do it in Oracle and maybe MySQL, can't remember exactly, they use limit instead of top n. So that limit then goes at the end. You don't put it there, you put it at the end, limit 10. And offset is another thing related to top n, which we'll probably have a look at later in the program. So that's why you can't just have the field name there, because by the time it does the having, it hasn't yet figured out that average pop is an alias for that field, because it does the select there. It does the having before the select. So after it's done the select, then it knows that average pop is an alias for that calculation. So what you can do, you can do an order by average pop, because when it gets to order by, it's done this select element, So it knows that average pop is just a field name. And there you go. So that is grouping and aggregation. So now I'm going to give you a challenge. In fact, I'm going to give you more than one challenge. I'm going to give you 4 challenges. So number 1. Using the HR database, calculate the average hourly rate by job title for employees. Note that managers and team leaders are paid annually, so we'll need to filter these out because we're not interested in salaried employees at this stage. So I will show you the table for that. So from employees, wrong database, use SQHR, employees, E, in a join job history, JH, on JH.person ID equals E.person ID, in a join jobs, because we're going to need the job title, call that J, on J.job ID equals JH.job ID, and then we want hourly rates, and that is held in pay elements, call that PE, on PE.person ID, equals JH.person ID. And if you remember from the lesson when I talked about these tables, PE has 2 joins. It joins on job ID as well, equals JH.job ID. So what I'll do is I'll say E.employee number, E.forename, E.surname, we'll have J.job title, and we'll have PE.star. So you won't need all these fields. So what I'll do is I'll just move that over there, put this challenge back on screen. So that's the query that you need. So notice it says here we need to filter out salaried employees. Okay, so you can find a way of doing that. So the number 2 is to take the result from number 1 and add some fields. So what you should end up with is job title column, then average rate, lowest rate, highest rate. Number 3 is from your sales table in the SQL training database. Show sales order quantities by year. So by quantities I mean your sum, your min, your max, your average and your count. So your results should look something like this. So order year column and then those aggregated columns. Number 4 is to change this. So the summary field is product name instead of year. And then add a filter so it only shows data for products sold in 2017. Okay, so have a go at those. Pause the video, have a go at those, and I'll see you back here shortly. Okay, so let's have a look at those. Okay, number 1. Average hourly rate by job title for employees. So we looked at this, we saw our pay elements table. Let's first filter out your hourly, so your salaried employees. So it's where PE.pay type equals, we just want hourly paid. Okay, so that gets rid of your managers and team leaders. And then the only field we need is pay value from there. So now we just need to group it by job title. So we need job title and pay value, which looks on its own like that. But we need to apply an aggregation to pay value, average rate, and then we need to group by job title. Hopefully you figured that out from the video, and that's what that looks like. Now actually in the challenge question, I gave these nicely formatted titles, didn't I? Just copied those. So what you can do is this. Job title, put it in double quotes, And that way when you run it, it comes out nicely headed, column headers. So number 2, I will put it in here. So minimum and maximum rates, well, we'll just take this. No, we won't. We'll say min, copy that, field value, lowest rate, so as rate, and then we'll copy that, max, highest rate. Okay, so that is your solution to number 2. Number 1 and 2 together. Your job titles, 1 row for each job title. Because when you group by a field, you can guarantee that is unique. Yeah, there's only 1 row for back office, 1 for cafe assistant, 1 for cashier, because we've grouped by that. So that means it's 1 row per group. Okay, from the sales table in SQL training, let's go use SQL training again. There's a table called sales. Let's move that up a little. So it's a lot of dates, a lot of product names, a lot of quantities. So we've asked for sales order quantities by year. So to get by year, we need to group the data by the year of order date. So we can say date, name, year, order date as order year. So that means we need to group that by the same field. And in fact, just a little side note, because we've done that, that's the same as doing select distinct on that order year without the group by. Yeah, if we've done that, same result. So group by at one field and distinct on that one field gives you the same result. So now we've done that, we need to say sum of quantity as odd. That gives you the total quantity sold in that year. And then we've got, what was it, min, max, average and count. So min, min, odd, max as max, odd, average, average, odd, and finally count as count, odd. So that there is your answer to number 3. So the years in a column, and then each of those figures, all that data grouped by the year of the order date. Now question 4 says to change the summary field, so we're going to take this to be product name and add a filter so it shows data by product for 2017 only. So for that, the 2017 only, we can get the order year and we can move it from our select into our where clause equals 2017. And now our grouping field needs to be product name instead of the year. And there's your answer. So there's the quantities sold in 2017. Now what I could have asked, and what I probably should have done, was for you to add another filter. Let's say to only show those rows where the total sales in 2017 are 7 or more. So why don't you have a go at that? Pause it now, have a go at that. It should only take you a minute, and then I'll come back and show you what the solution is. So hopefully that wasn't too difficult. What we're asking for here is to say where the sum of quantity is greater than or equal to 7, and we do that not in the where clause but in the having greater than or equal to 7. So we should just see Audi, milk, mobile phone and whiteboard. And there you go. So that's aggregation. This is something you'll do a lot of. Currently we're covering the core fundamental SQL. So everything we do in these current sort of first section of lessons, you'll be using it pretty much every time you write queries. So that's a big one there, aggregation. So hopefully that was pretty clear. Anything you're not sure about, get on those group calls, ask me, I'll go through it with you. That's why we have those calls. That's why I am here. I'm here for you. So that's it for today. Take care and I'll see you soon. And don't forget, keep turning up. Goodbye.